All right, so if you have been watching, we have been doing a series on how to build a home. But the thing we haven't discussed is how do you actually finance a home? So I invited my friend, Devonte Brooks. He is my preferred lender, and he is going to discuss what financing looks like when you're going to purchase a brand new build and or build your own home. So welcome, Devonte. Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate you having me. It's always a good time when we get together and talk about fun things about buying a property, financing, real estate, all the fun things under the sun.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, start out from the very beginning. What should somebody be doing when they're thinking about building a new home when it comes to the financing side of things?
So that's a great question. It's very similar to buying an existing property. Okay, so what I mean by that, you still have to go through the pre-approval process. You have to see what your maximum purchase price is going to be. But the biggest difference as far as existing and then new construction financing is based on some of the builders' requirements. Okay, so what I mean by that, some builders will require that you put down certain percentage as far as a down payment or have a certain amount of earnest money up front. But as far as what your maximum purchase price is going to be, it's still going to be the traditional process. Okay. So sometimes people freak out maybe about new construction financing, thinking that they have to put down like 20% or they have to put down 50%. Most of the times, if you're working with either a regional builder and you're not building a property like from the ground up, okay, and you're working with a builder, you still have the same loan guidelines. So if you're a first-time home buyer, you can put down as little as 3%. If you're a repeat home buyer, 5%. A lot of times people think that you have to break the bank for your down payment to purchase a home. So the most important piece about that is when you're considering building a property or going through that new construction process, connecting with that builder as soon as possible because every builder has their baseline product, but nobody really goes with that, right? You have your add-ons and everything else. So how that really works for you, let's just give numbers as an example. Let's say that you're pre-approved for $500,000. You have a builder that says, okay, our baseline product for a new construction build, it's $400,000, but then you have add-ins. So you can get different flooring material or different carpet, things of that nature. What that allows you to do, it gives you some bandwidth where you can work up to that $500,000 price point and again, still put down a minimum down payment if you want to, or have those other options. So overall, the numbers still work out where it's very similar, but sometimes people can overthink and think that they'll need a lot of money out of pocket to purchase new construction, but it's just based on the builder and actually what you're doing. All right. So two different types of new construction. It's actually building up yourself or working with a builder that will be building the property for you.
Yeah, that's a really good point because there are inventory homes, which are brand new houses, but nobody's ever lived them. And then
Right.
obviously you customize, you're designing it, you're doing all the things
Hmm.
that are going into it. So it's a little bit different in that aspect. Now, as far as somebody doing the whole build from the very beginning,
Yeah.
sometimes people are going out and buying a lot, sitting on it for a while, and then building. What does
Yep.
that look like for
So that is a
somebody?
little bit different. So that's great because people can own little, plots of land and have their own lot where they want to build at some point. So at that point, that will be considered construction financing, okay? Because you own that lot, but then you're having somebody build on that lot. So typically for financing aspects, that's when you will need more money out of pocket or more skin in the game, okay? So for most financing companies, banks, credit unions, whomever, they typically will require that you have somewhere between 20 to 25% as far as its total construction costs as a down payment for that property. Just for easy numbers for this, don't be freaked out by this, but let's just say that it's going to cost you, maybe you own the lot already, but it's going to cost you $1 million to buy a property. Then what the bank or that credit union or whoever will require is that they'll finance, $800,000 of that, right? But you need to come up with $200,000 to have some skin in the game for that construction. So they're coming up with the bulk of the money, but they want you to be invested as well. So with that construction financing, that typically will be interest only for a 12 to 24 month period. So what that means to you is while that property is being built, your out-of-pocket costs, your monthly carrying costs or payments, it's going to be a little bit lower. And then once the property is finished, then you can refinance that loan to traditional financing. Okay. So the goal and mission for that new construction or construction financing is just making sure you have some skin in the game, but it's not long-term financing. Okay. The goal is for you to finance out of that to a regular traditional loan, but it gives you some bandwidth while that home is being built. So if you want to make some changes, if you want to have some other upgrades, you have a contingency account that's built into that as well, in order to do that new construction.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question is because you get a bid and things can change. Even if you don't upgrade, costs change. Sometimes it just kind of depends on what's going on. So how does that
Absolutely.
get handled typically?
Yeah, so with that being said, typically there will be a contingency fund that will be between 10 and 15% of the overall construction cost. So how that is worked into it, some financing companies will work that into the loan, and then some financing companies will say, hey, this is just going to be part of your down payment that you're putting down. So if you have a 10 or 15% contingency fund, you're coughing up that money for those things that may pop up. And then some other places are pretty lenient about that, that if something does pop up and let's say your financing is all done, you can't access anymore, then they'll just have you pay out of pocket as those things pop up and come up. So you have options. It just depends on the financing institution of what they expect. But as you know, with construction or renovations, as you get into the project, things can change, right? Things can pop up that you don't expect, whether it's something with grading or something with plumbing. Things just pop up. It's construction. You don't know until you actually get into a project, and things can change one way or another. But with that being said, it just depends on that lending institution. So either paying out of pocket, having that contingency fund, or paying up front for that contingency fund outside of financing it.
Yeah, no, that's really great.
Mhm.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but there
Mhm.
also is quote unquote phases sometimes in financing. So you
Mhm.
get so much money up front to start the project, the next phase, the next phase. Is that pretty accurate?
That is pretty accurate. And the reason why it's done like that is to protect you as a client and then also the bank too, right? Now, for all intents and purposes, builders and contractors, they have the intent to do the work, but sometimes what you don't want to do, and there's been experiences with this, is that if you give that contractor or that builder all the money up front, then they really don't have an incentive to keep things pushing along. And then sometimes there could be bad actors out there. This doesn't happen often, but it is something to consider. Somebody can take all that money, they can just run off with it and not do your project, right? So, with that being said, there are phases that go into that. So, you're kind of having that carrot stick in a sense to say, okay, you're going to get $200,000 up front to do X, Y, and Z, to frame out the property, to order X, Y, and Z, to do the foundation. And then once that's done, okay, we want another work order to verify what you need funds for up front. So there are different phases that you can that sometimes financial institutions can put in there to make sure that that person's just not getting all the money up front, then not doing the work or being very slow. Okay. Obviously, we want to make sure both parties are protected, but in order to make sure that project is moving along, they typically want it in phases to make sure that, okay, A is done, now we can go to B, now B is done, we can go to C, and to make sure that we have a timeline to get that project done and that people just aren't holding the money and not doing any work.
Yeah. And who determines those phases?
So it's going to be the financing institution will determine it because they're the one that was really coughing up a majority of the money. So they will determine what those phases will be as far as what needs to be done. There is a little bit of a dance with that too, with the builder and the contractor just stating like, hey, you know what, I can't do X, Y, and Z unless I have this money. So they will have some correspondence as far as what that cadence will look like with the draw period and how much money they'll need. So it's not always a hard and fast rule. There is some gray area there, but really a majority of the time it is dictated by the financing institution because they hold a majority of the money, right? It's their money that they're providing to the build, so they want to make sure it's protected.
Yeah. And, and correct me if I'm wrong on this too, but builders will sometimes take on that construction loan so that you as a buyer don't have that and just get your normal financing at the end, correct?
That is correct. Some builders would do that because they can get some preferred terms, essentially because they have a larger bank account, essentially, and have a more of a relationship with a bank or financial institution. So they can take on that risk or that construction cost up front, and then you can have traditional financing that you have to close in product. Typically, what will happen when builders do that, they will want some commitment up front from you. So they may have non-refundable earnest money to make sure that they're not doing all this work building a property for you and you don't have any skin in the game, right? They're taking a huge financial risk there that you're customizing a home they don't have anything from you, right? And they don't want to build a home for you, then have to sell it to somebody else, and it may not be that person's taste. All right. So there are some commitments that the builder will want from you with that earnest money or something non-refundable, but some builders would do that. And they're taking more of the risk there, but they still will want something from you if they're going to take that risk and have that construction financing and just have you complete the end loan on that financing.
Yeah. So there's some benefit to that, obviously, for the builder. They are
Hmm.
going to own the property until the new financing comes in, right?
Exactly.
But they're also taking on the risk of you defaulting or just
It's a
changing the
trade-off, or you
rent.
pulling out of the contract, something of that nature. So it is a risk. And builders, they build properties to sell, right? So for some reason, if you can't buy that property, they will find somebody else to buy it, maybe at a discount too. You may play, it just depends on what their projects they're at, how quick they're trying to close out a development, things of that nature. But sometimes they'll have incentives for those situations too, like, hey, we built this property for this person, the financing didn't go through, we need to get rid of this property. So they may, I want to say give a discount, but they may pay for some closing costs. They may reduce the purchase price for a little bit. So they'll have some type of incentive a lot of times for those homes that are constructed and the original person that it was constructed for didn't pull through and they just want to get off their books.
Yeah. So a lot of nuances to
Yeah,
building a home, but
absolutely.
nothing that you can't handle, right?
Absolutely. With the right team, right? It's all about education and having the right team with you. Building a home, I've done it. It can be a lot of different things that you have to take on. So you have to make sure that you have the right people in the right places and have communication of what you need to do every step of the way because it can be overwhelming. You have to think about it at the end of the day. I'm not a designer. I don't know what may look good. I have an idea of it, but when you go through the process, they cover your blind spots that you don't even think about, right? Whether it's color schemes, what you should do with your countertops, lighting, there's a lot of decisions to make. So it's very important that you work with people that you trust, whether it's your real estate agent, if you hire an interior designer, because I'm sure if you've seen a lot of real estate and a lot of properties, and you walked in, and you're like, why did the person make that decision, right? And a lot of times
Uh-huh.
that happens because people think in their mind like, hey, this is going to look good, but they don't see it until when it's done, and they're like, oh, that's not good. So funny story with this. There was a new construction. Well, it was a property that a client built. I was doing an open house, and there was a property in a development that a client was the one that built the property. They were the only owners, and they were selling it. But when I was walking through that property, they had different wood floors on the first floor for like every room, right? So it was a little bit different. So it didn't match. So there was just different styles of wood floors in each room. And then you think about that, like in the person, they thought, oh, this is going to be cool. And they were probably talking to somebody. But when you look at it, you're like, oh my goodness. And that is one thing where you have to think about that at the end of the day, you may have to sell this property going forward. So even though you like this as a style, you need to think about sellability going forward, and not that your style is going to be for everybody. But I was talking to the real estate agent and just looking at it myself, they're like, we don't know why that person did that, but at the end of the day, that person made that decision. So you need a good sounding board of somebody that's going to be honest with you and cover your blind spots of what is going to give you the most bang for your buck with this new construction property if you sell it in 7 to 10 years. And that's one part where people kind of miss the boat on that, where they want to take all these decisions. But I'm always in the boat of leaning on professionals to catch my blind spots. Just like when I talk to people about financing, like this is what I do every single day. I will talk to you about it to make sure you understand what's going on and just break it down to make it easy, because it's not your profession. So let me do the heavy lifting for it. So I run in that area, that I rather have advice from professionals to make sure I'm making a really sound decision, whatever that looks like. But I definitely think it's very important for new construction.
Yeah, and the thing is too is new construction, especially if you're building from the ground up, that's a 6 to 8 month process.
Yes.
And then you got a whole year warranty. So you're going to be with that builder, with the financing institution for a long time. You want to
Yes,
make sure you're picking that right team,
absolutely.
communication wise, obviously price, but there's a lot more to it than just finding a pretty home. There's a lot of
Exactly.
that goes
A
on.
lot of details that go into it that you just don't think about until you're actually in it. So it's very important. And again, it's an exciting process, but it can be very stressful. So you want to try to minimize that stress. And how you do that, you lean on professionals.
Exactly. Exactly.
Cool.
Well, do you have anything else before we hop off here?
No, what I would say right now, where we're at with our, what I would add to this is that in our housing supply shortage that we have right now, new construction can be something that people sometimes think that they don't maybe qualify for, or maybe that can be overwhelming, where like there's a lot that goes into it. It's not. Builders right now, they need to build homes because we have such a severe home shortage for existing properties and everything else. So new construction can be a great option for a lot of people because you can kind of customize that property. It is fun. You can put your spin on it. But I think people sometimes can overthink that process. But if you haven't gone through the new construction process before, builders and real estate agents love discussing that development of that property. So it's definitely something that people should look at based on our housing inventory right now. We're suffering from something called the lock-in effect, all right? So people don't know what that is. A majority of people that have homes right now that bought during COVID and refinanced, they got rates of 2 and 3%, and they're not selling those homes right now because they don't want to exchange that interest rate, right? So we have a lot of inventory that's off the market. So if you don't have any existing inventory, you need to look at new inventory, right? So sometimes people just need some encouragement to look at new construction products, and don't make it overwhelming for yourself. It is a little bit, it's easier than what people think it's going to be, especially with builders this day and age. They really want to work with people to get into homes. They know we need inventory. So I think new construction can be a great option for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually something we discuss on our home buyer webinar. So if you guys
Mhm.
are out there, we go over the market, we talk about buyer strategies, all that. That is a bi-weekly thing that goes on. So let me know if you want to sign up for that. But thank you, Devontae, for stepping
Absolutely.
in here and giving them great advice on just new construction financing. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Anytime you need me, you know where to find me.
Sounds good.